Hey everyone, I'm Eric and welcome back to another SDR Game podcast episode. My guest today is Krysten Conner, sales strategist at UserGems. And today we are going to talk about enterprise prospecting. Krysten, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we start, can you start explaining what you do at UserGems and what's UserGems?
So I am in a sales strategist role at UserGems, basically working with our sales teams on deal strategy and also working with our marketing team to just kind of help spread the good news about UserGems. And what we do in a nutshell is automate the process of helping you track your past buyers and champions as they change jobs. And then once they change jobs and they're able to buy from you again, then we help you automatically multi-thread into those accounts so that your past buyers aren't selling on their own inside their organization. So being able to really, especially in this market where it's where people are so hesitant, the best customers you have are going to be the ones that have bought from you before.
And that's a really good one because also for me, in my current role and previous role, so that's prospects that I'm focusing a lot because they are easier to book a meeting with, but also to close. So also what's interesting for this episode, because right now that's your new role, sales strategist, but before that you were an enterprise account executive for a long time. So that's why also we're going to talk about enterprise prospecting today, because you have been prospecting enterprise accounts for a really long time. So what do you think is the difference between selling/prospecting mid-market accounts and enterprise accounts?
Yeah, it's a really smart question because I think people don't often know that it's a really big difference. So to your point, I have always been a full cycle AE. So even there are times when I've had SDR, BDR support, but I've always been responsible for some part of my own pipeline. And that's since, probably 6 years in tech now, 5+ in enterprise accounts. And that's at places like Outreach, Salesforce, and Tableau. So some large companies selling to large accounts. And there's a big difference between enterprise and mid-market. Usually when you have a mid-market book, you have lots and lots of accounts that you can prospect, maybe hundreds. But for a true enterprise role, it's going to be a handful. And for like a strategic type role, you may have at the ultimate strategic level, like at Salesforce, they may have one current customer and they may have one or two prospects that they're trying to open up that account. So there's a huge range of the people of the companies that you can approach. And so you want to be careful and thoughtful with how you do that. You can't just, if you burn a bridge somewhere, I mean, that's really going to affect you in enterprise much more so than it would in mid-market. Never good, but probably you're going to feel that more in enterprise. And so in enterprise, you just need to do a lot more research before you start prospecting to really truly understand the account. Whereas if you're in like a SMB, like a small business role or a mid-market role, you can understand kind of more generally around like your personas and problems you solve, versus if you're only handling a few accounts, you want to go really, really deep into the specific problem that enterprise team is facing.
Those who are listening, so you mentioned that, for example, an enterprise account executive can have like maybe a strategic enterprise account executive can have like maybe 3 or 4 accounts. For an SDR, I don't know a lot of strategic SDR, but I met a few. Generally, they have like 6 or 7 accounts, something like that, and they work with maybe 3 A's at the same time.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
And like you mentioned, so for the mid-market and SMB prospecting, generally it's more like focused on the industry and the persona. So you can do some research, but maybe not the same as enterprise. So can we talk about your process with prospecting a new account? So let's say when you started at UserGems, what was your process to go after a new enterprise account?
Yeah, so I think it's really, really important for AEs and SDRs to work together. because the SDR is generally going to be on the phone more and hear more kind of chatter around the organization, right? And the AE is usually going to be the one responsible for really digging in to like the 10K, or really digging into the industry. And so it's kind of a top down, bottom up, and both of them have something that they can, that's really important to contribute. And so in those roles, I met with the SDRs that worked those accounts either once a week or once every other week, because you want to work together to develop a strategy based on what everyone is hearing and researching and understanding from the market. So that partnership is really, really important. Ideally, I think one of the things that enterprise or strategic AEs should be helping SDRs and bringing to those meetings is the enterprise AE should have read the 10K for that organization, and they should be able to have the top kind of takeaways to feed the SDR. The SDR is the specialist in being able to have those conversations on the fly, on the phone, but it's much easier if you say, here are the 10, talking points that are going to resonate. Here's the vocabulary that's important. Here are the personas that this person is new in the organization. So they've been very ambitious in past organizations, like feeding the stuff that's going to inform, so that the SDR is not just like left out there, there's no reason for both people to be doing that kind of work. But I think probably in the most successful like AE SDR prospecting relationships that I've had, both of them are looking at the book of business and saying, okay, here's the accounts that look like good prospects for us. They have a lot of end users. They're in the right industry. They have, a tech stack that works well with ours. Those are things that both of them should be kind of looking at and understanding to know where's the best place to spend our time.
So now you have your account. What's your process with this account, for example? Do you start account planning? Do you start with an account plan? Do you start reading a 10K, or how do you start?
Yeah, so I have every organization that I've been with, every like unicorn organization I've been with, you have to do an account plan for usually like the top 10% of your accounts. And if you're only handling one or two, you're definitely doing it for both. And yeah, so that account plan is going to be this working document that everybody contributes to, so that everybody knows where everything is. And generally, it's going to be like how many employees do they have? Who are their competitors, especially competitors that use our technology? Who are our reference customers in their space? What do we know about their tech stack? How do they make money? From their 10K, you want to be looking at things like what are their goals around? And generally, a company is going to be looking at primarily talking about one of three things broadly in a 10K. They're going to be talking about growth, risk, or efficiency. Companies that are lots of tech companies, well, especially in the past, have been high growth companies. So they're going to be talking about how they plan to grow. Older legacy type companies, which is mostly what you're going to be dealing with in enterprise or strategic accounts, are going to be talking about risk. What risks do they see to their business? Who are their competitors, especially if their product is considered a commodity? And they may be talking about efficiency, right? Like, how do we have efficiency in the organization around these things? And so that's what you want to pull out of the 10K and then put into that account plan, so that every time the AE has a meeting, they can go back and look at that. And every time the SDR is getting ready to do a call session, right, they can look at that and understand, here's what's important to that organization. Here's the vocabulary I should use. That way, nobody is relying on their memory as they're working on these large accounts.
And what's your process with, for example, the 10K, your research? Because I remember I saw one of your posts a few months ago. You were talking about the 10K, that you're spending maximum 15 minutes. So what do you do in those 15 minutes?
So especially at the beginning of the year, whenever you just get your new book of business or you just get a new account, you want to spend 15 minutes getting an overall feel, and you may go a lot deeper later in the year. But what you're going to want to search For things like words like risk, like we just talked about, initiative, strategy, invest in, you want to control F and search for those things. That way you can understand immediately those key points and dig into them. Sometimes the risk part of their 10K may be 5 pages long. So even though you're searching for 4 or 5 keywords, fully looking at those is probably going to take you about 15 minutes. But once you do that, you have a much better understanding of where they're focused. And then especially as for an SDR, especially for anyone who's prospecting, that's enough for you to start having a conversation. Hey, I read in your 10K that you're seeing risks around losing market share to you're the number 2 in your space, but number 3 is creeping up. How are you thinking about, using efficiencies around XYZ to grab market share? And then, that's enough to start a conversation.
Do you use Command F to find those words in the 10K or something else?
Yeah, you use Control F like to search the document, just like you would any like PDF. Because usually on and where you can find that is you can on the company your prospect company. If you're prospecting to IBM, you go to IBM's webpage. You could you go to Investor Relations, and then they'll list all of their most recent reports, whether annual or quarterly. You get that as a PDF, and then you can search it.
Do you just read the annual one or also the quarterly ones?
It kind of depends on where you are in the year. I mean, if it's Q3, you should be looking at their most recent one as well. But I always like to look at the annual one, and then depending where they are in the year, looking at the most recent ones, because you can say, hey, I saw that at the beginning of the year, this was a priority, or you were seeing a lot of risk around this. And I saw in Q3 that your earnings were down. Is that risk still affecting you? And obviously the risk that you want to be asking about is one that your product or offering can solve. Otherwise, conversation is going to go anywhere, but you want to be able to weave that thread together. The other thing that you can do is you can Google the company and then search, and then then narrow down the Google search by news, because especially around earnings report time, analysts' comments are going to be summarized. And analysts get paid a lot of money to dissect what's happening with these companies. And so when they issue their comments, that will save you a lot of work, or you trying to deduce what's happening. Because, if you read 3 analysts' questions and then in their investor chat, or you read a summary of the analyst report or what the Wall Street thinks is going to happen, you'll have a pretty good idea of how the market is thinking about it and what the company is probably either excited about or worried about.
So just to make sure I understood correctly, are you talking about the earning calls, and on the transcript you can find this information? Or?
Yes. Earnings calls, like looking at earnings calls, I kind of merge those together. So earnings calls is one thing, but if you Google, if we're prospecting IBM and you Google IBM and then you filter your Google search by news at the top, a lot of times if something super noteworthy came out of their Q3 earnings report that has people freaked out, it's going to be at the top of that news.
Just to go back on what you said about the quarterly reports, I was prospecting an account a month ago, something like that. And I was reading the 10K, it's not the 10K, but the quarterly report. And I just saw that, for example, they laid off 10% of their team 2 weeks ago. When I was reading, 2 weeks before I was reading the 10K, they laid off. So, and I didn't see any news about this. So in the 10K, you can find really good information, actually, if it's the business is in a good situation or not also. To go back on what you're saying at the beginning, so you said that at some companies, you work on an account plan, for example, for your 10%, for your top 10% accounts. What do you do with the rest, with the 90%? Do you have like a different process, or?
It depends on the company. So if you have, 20 to 50 to 100 accounts, there's no way that you could do account plans for all of them. And unless your organization is amazing in ways that no one else is, there's no way that all of those accounts are a good fit for you. And so that's why you want to do the work up front to narrow down the 10%. And it's not that you're not prospecting. If you have 100 accounts, like, yeah, you should be prospecting. You should be doing something in all of them, but it's just not like the bottom 70 or 80% of those that aren't as good a fit. You can afford to do things that are more general, but the ones that are the biggest targets, the best, prospects, where you want to make sure that you've done your research, you want to make sure that you've done kind of deep personalization, because those are the big swings you're hoping to take.
You were talking about the ratio for the SDI relationship, and you started to talk a bit about that, but the below and above the power line. So how do you work with an SDR to do that? So how do you focus on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kevin Dorsey has this saying that he says that describes it really well as far as like calling at all levels of the organization. He talks about calling low in the organization for intel, calling mid-level like management folks for insight, and calling high like executives for influence. And so like if this is a new, in situations where I've been prospecting into enterprise new logos, a lot of the times you're not going to get your first meeting with the VP of sales. But what you may get is an AE who's really interested in your product. They've been on your website a lot, and so they may take a meeting because they want what you have, and so they want to know more, and they're willing to tell you like, hey, here are the people that you should be connecting with in our organization. So I love to see SDRs calling even low in the organization at the beginning, right? Like, and you have to work out with your organization how SDRs are comped on this too, because if they're only comped when you get a meeting with director and above, you really can't ask them to be calling below that. That's really not fair for how they're compensated. So like everybody, there should be good communication there. But as an AE, I've taken multiple calls with other AEs, or definitely below the director level, just to get the information that I need to use that information to go higher in the organization. And then sometimes I've seen organizations have SDRs run the discovery with either like at the end user level or at like a manager level, because it gives the SDR, if the SDR wants to become an AE, it gives them practice running discovery calls. And then the AE can focus on other things. So there's a lot of ways to handle it, because if you are trying to get into a big brand new account, you're going to, unless you work for a Salesforce where your CEO can call their CEO and you can just walk in, that's not most of us, right? So lots of times you need to start at the bottom to understand the organization first.
I'm pretty familiar with what you mentioned because I've seen the posts of Katie about this. But for those who are not familiar with it, what's a lot of talking to an end user? Are you looking to see what their current pains are, and then what you do with that?
So two things I want to know when I talk to the end users. And you mentioned above the line and below the line. So this is a Skip Miller term, and the line is the power line, right? Like somebody who has the power to sign something. So executives are above the line, manager below are below the line. It's just, and both of them have valuable information. It's just they care about different things. And so you need to know who you're talking to. So end users care about, can you help me do my job? Does your thing work for what I want? And so like when I talk to an end user, I will part of what I'll do is show them how I think this can work for them, because that's why they're on the call. The other thing, if they agree that, oh yeah, this does what I thought it does, I really think we could use this, then the next thing is, okay, who in your organization would you suggest I talk to? Because if you're prospecting into a 5 or 10,000 or 50,000 person organization, there may be 100 VPs of something. And so a lot of times they'll say, hey, yeah, like my boss doesn't really get involved with this, but Sally's the VP of product marketing, and she really cares about this, even though her title is product marketing. You wouldn't think so, but she really does. And she's the CMO's best friend. Like, they'll tell you like those little internal like politics in the organization that will be a big shortcut for you. And that's like, they can't introduce you to the CMO, nor should you ask them to, because they don't even know them, right? Like, you're not asking them for introductions, but you're just asking them for information. So do you think this will help? If so, who should we be talking to? And the other thing I love to ask end users is like, how do you refer to this problem or this project internally? In other words, is this called project pipeline? Is this called, project save the day? Is this project Eagle, whatever? Or like, is this the C3 initiative or whatever? Because then when you talk with other people, you are using that vocabulary, and that telegraphs to them that you are already talking to people in their organization. You sound like an insider. You sound like one of us. You don't sound like an outsider. So that's one of the most valuable things that people in end user roles can help you with is who's who in the zoo and how do you talk about this in your organization.
I really like that, because that go back to what you're saying at the beginning. In the company, you can see the vocabulary, and that's not something I was thinking about. But yeah, because generally we try to use words maybe that marketing gave us and to talk about what we do, but now you can talk about the specific vocabulary of the company. And also what you mentioned about the you said, for example, Sally, the VP of product marketing, she's owning this, for example. And that's something I realized right now, because I'm working with data leaders, like you did at Tableau, actually. So we have BI leaders and analytics leaders also. And here I'm pretty new to the space, so sometimes I'm just focused too much on the title, thinking about, hey, I should talk to this person. But then when you talk to an IC of the company, I say, no, you should talk to this person, because even though the title is not the right title, and I think that's, super valuable to do that. So what do you do next? So now you have your information from an end user. Do you talk to I imagine to the person they gave you? So generally it's like a manager or director.
So, I mean, you want to ask their permission. So can I use your name, or should I just say, I've been talking with your team, because you obviously they've given you time and information. You don't want to throw them under the bus if they don't want you to know that. You also want to, ask them, who else should I be talking to? It may not be a manager or director level. It may be another, end user level person, but they are on a different team. And so they know how both teams could use your product. So you want to talk to, a number of people. And then what you want to do then is take that information and use it to get the next meeting. So, hey, I was talking with, multiple folks on the teams that do this. It sounds like the problems that they're having, it sounds like there's problems related to pipeline that you didn't hit in Q1. People are kind of worried about Q2. We got a lot of organizations who are facing that problem, and they're now looking to find their past buyers, because that's a quick way to build pipeline. So you're leveraging that inside information to get that next meeting with the next higher level person.
I know when I was doing some research also for this episode, you talk a lot about multi-threading in prospecting also. So what's multi-threading? Is it, because I know it could be like the channels you are using, but I think here it's more about contacting different people at the company. So is it like we talk about right now, or is it something different?
Most companies, most companies, for what they sell, the buying committee that's going to be involved is going to be anywhere from 4 to 12 people. Like Harvard Business Review says now it's 5.7 people that are involved in a buying decision at a company, right? And usually your marketing team will have come and said to you, like, here are the 3 personas we sell to. We need to talk to VPs of sales, VPs of marketing, and VPs of rev ops or sales ops. These are, and a good marketing team will tell you, here's the pain that these 3 personas feel that we solve. And here's how we solve those things. And so when you're multi-threading, when you're prospecting, you want to be reaching out to every persona in that organization that is generally someone who buys from you. And so you're going to take that good intel that marketing has given you, or that you've gathered from the customer stories showing which problems you solve, because I solve a different problem for a VP of sales than I do a VP of marketing. And so my messaging to them is going to be different. Otherwise, it's just going to fall flat. So it's not enough just to reach out with the same email or phone call script to all the different people on the buying committee. You need to alter it for what they care about. A VP of sales, when you say dirty data to them, they're like, yeah, Salesforce data is crap. Right. RevOps is like, oh my God, it's driving me crazy. We can't do reporting. They care about those in very different ways. And so your prospecting will go a lot farther if you speak the language of the personas that you're talking with. And it will never be enough to just be talking, well, not never, but very rarely be enough to be talking to just one person in a deal. And so what gets a meeting a lot of times is the buzz that you are creating by contacting multiple people in that organization, because like we talked about before, sometimes we don't get the titles right. So sometimes, they might say, hey, yeah, I know my thing says VP RevOps, but really what you need is we also have a VP of marketing operations, and this falls under them. I can't help you, but I think this sounds intriguing. I'm going to introduce you to Rebecca. Or so when you create that buzz and everyone is getting something from you, people are going to be like, oh, yeah, wasn't Dan just talking about that last week? Let's, send this over the fence to him. So when you create that buzz, you increase the likelihood that somebody is going to take a meeting with you.
So you are giving the example of the sales team, the ops team, the marketing team. When, let's say, you already have some information, do you try to book the 3 teams at the same time, or you try to talk with them separately? Or what's your process? Separately? Why?
Separately. Because group demos can go wrong in lots and lots of ways. And so you want to, again, because what they care about is different. You solve different pain, and somebody's going to check out and start looking at their phone or looking at Slack because you're talking about something that doesn't pertain to them, versus if you can meet with them each individually, especially at the beginning, you're able to really do discovery and really tailor the conversation to the things that they care about. But you can use one meeting to get the other, right? So if I get a meeting with VP of sales, then I'm immediately, before that meeting even happens, I'm reaching out to the VP of marketing and saying, hey, I am meeting with James, who's your VP of sales. He's looking to solve this problem. A lot of times marketers need to build pipeline. They have a pipeline number. I don't know how you guys are tracking towards that, but if you guys are also looking for a way to help build your pipeline faster, maybe it would be worth a conversation. And a lot of times when I've done that, especially in enterprise, sometimes marketing and sales and ops or multiple different departments are looking for what you do, but they haven't told anyone else because they are only thinking about the way that it affects them, but you can help everybody. And so sometimes it's very helpful when you are then connecting the dots for them, because it may not be, maybe somebody, an executive they've never even met. If it's true enterprise, there's 10,000 to 50,000 people in that company. It could easily be someone that where they could both have the same interest, both your product could work for both. You can pull budget from both, and that's why they're interested too, right? Because if they want what you have, but they don't have the full budget for it, but they can pool with 3 other execs, you've created then something, you've created value because you connected them with people they didn't know could help them get what they wanted.
What you mentioned right now about talking to them separately also, I think but it's kind of like what you're doing with your prospecting approach, because you said you want to be really tailored to each team and not, maybe if having a demo with the 3 teams that you know that's maybe not everything will be valuable for everyone. So, okay, I really like that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say before we move on from that, I think there's an important call out there, because I've seen organizations where if there's an opportunity that's already started, sometimes SDRs won't be comped on setting another meeting because there's already an opportunity started. But I especially for enterprise, I think that thinking is misguided. You can't, like, you need more than one meeting, and at the beginning of a deal, the AE has other things that they're working on. The SDR is a specialist in getting new people to take meetings. So I've gone to bat and said, hey, I am asking I am asking this SDR to, I want this meeting. I have a meeting with VP of sales. I want VP marketing. I want VP rev ops. Can we agree that if they get those meetings, because this is a 6, 7, 8-figure potential deal, can we agree that if they get those meetings, that will count towards their quota? Because again, I can't ask an SDR to work on something that's not going to help them with what they need, right? And I've also, like, again, maybe falling in the camp of asking forgiveness rather than permission. What I have done is sometimes I've opened a separate up with a VP. Like if I get one meeting and I say SDR, we're looking for VP marketing, and they get another one, I will open that up and leave it open until they're comped on it, and then just combine it with the other one. Because again, like, and this is an example of how, like, we need to understand how the other person benefits from this and work together, because that's a win-win, right? Like I don't have to make 40 calls to get that meeting that I need. And so I get to work on what I need to work on, which is closing the other later stage deals. And the SDR gets comped for what they are supposed to be doing, which is setting valuable new meetings. So it's a win-win. You just have to know how your organization works and make sure that you're doing it in a way that benefits everybody.
Yeah, actually talking to the working at companies with enterprise motion for SDRs and talking to other SDRs. So generally, when the company is pretty new in the space, trying to go after enterprise accounts, you are just compound the first meeting. But then, yeah, I was talking with a strategic SDR the other day, and now that he is, like you are mentioning about, he can get different opportunities or can book different meetings, and it will be on them. Because like you mentioned, here the goal is to help you sell. And I think in the enterprise segment, it's not enough to have like just one meeting for
Right.
for the SDR. So yeah, I think that's something interesting to help you close more, to close the deal actually.
Yep.
I know we are almost at the end, and I have something. I'm going to share it because I think it will be easier after the episode. But you've shared a template the other day. Don't remember when exactly, but an email template from an SVP of sales of a multi-billion-dollar unicorn to personalize prospecting email. So the email was about doing the math for them. Can you explain this email and how you think about this when you are sending this email? So what do you want to include on this email? And obviously I'm going to share the email.
In sales, we talk about one of our primary jobs being reducing friction, meaning making it easy for people to work with us. And so if we know that we add value to organizations, like in their size, and we know kind of some benchmark numbers that we can use, what we want to do is not count on them to do the math in their heads, but when we're reaching out to them, then we want to say, okay, so for user gems, I know what the average job change rate is. Like in the country, across the board, it's 21%. So and then if I know, especially for a large company, a lot of times they will publish on their website, like, hey, we work with 10,000, we work with 10,000 companies. 10,000 companies trust IBM to do whatever, right? So then okay, well, this is your number of companies that are customers. And then, okay, I think, well, now for user gems, I need to know, okay, well, how many people are on the buying committee for this company, right? So it's like, okay, so if they have 10,000 customers, let's say 5 people were responsible for making them a customer, right? So then that's 50,000 people that are familiar and made a buying decision. And if 20% of those change jobs every year, that's 10,000 warm leads that your company may be missing out on because you don't know where they went, and you don't know, and you don't have a motion for how to find those and re-engage them when they move jobs. And just doing those numbers, and I made it round numbers for easy math. It's better if they're not round, because the more not round a number is, the more specific it is, right? So if they say 11,231 customers trust, that's ideal, because then your numbers are going to be kind of messy, and messy numbers look real. But you're just helping them understand what this actually means. Because if I say to you, hey, I can help you get a lot of warm leads, that's different than saying you may be missing out on 10,000 people who can buy from you again. Like, that is an eye-catching number. And it's not, and in that email, like, I literally type, math teacher always said, show your work, right? Like, I went like, this number of customers times this buying committee times this job change rate, and then put the X in the little line, and then like, here's this. I've seen people do the math on like a piece of paper and take a picture. Handwriting, that's not something you see every day, but you're just not asking them to do the mental work of understanding how you can help them. You're showing them the impact from the beginning.
Because I think it's completely different to say, hey, I can give you 10,000 leads, because one, you don't know the business first, and you can say, I can give you 10,000 leads because you don't know. And here you're showing them that you've done your research and how many potential leads, because obviously it's specific for them. So I think it's super valuable for VPs or C-level executives, because you want to be specific as possible and you do the math for them. So I think that's pretty smart to do that. Because I remember also KD once was telling on the podcast, telling that he has a lot of people reaching to him saying, hey, I can 3x your pipeline. And he say, you don't know my pipeline. So, because imagine you have a pipeline of 50 million in Q1, and you say, I can 3x your pipeline. Okay, you're saying that you can get 150 million pipeline for me? So it's pretty specific, and I think that works really well.
It works if you know like benchmark metrics, and as long as you're in the right ballpark, they're gonna be impressed that you did the work. They don't expect it to be like perfect, right? Like, you're not giving them a quote, but you're showing them like, here is the possible impact, and the whole point of that is just to be for them to perk up and be like, oh, that's a fairly significant number, and I never thought about X, Y, or Z problem this way. I never attached these dollars to that problem. And that's what gets executive attention.
And what do you think about the number of words in your emails also? Because, for example, I know right now that there is a lot of people on LinkedIn say you should have a certain amount of words. So here, this emails, I think it's like maybe 200 words, something like that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So that email that's a good point, because I use Lavender a lot for like best practice on what makes a good email, and you don't want them to scroll at all, hopefully, but especially not that first email. So that email was actually the second email I sent. The first was I actually had a very loose connection with that VP from another company. I knew her by reputation, and so and also she and I had both worked at a same company in the past. And so the first email was, hey, I know you by reputation because I worked at Outreach and you were a legend there because of XYZ. I see we also survived XYZ company. I think I may be able to help with this. And then she said, interesting, bottom line it for me. And so that's when I went into that. But so that's why it's longer, is it wasn't a first email, but there's definitely a way to do it where there are fewer words. And in fact, if I was doing it on a first email, I would probably try to keep it to under 75 words and just use an image of where I did handwritten math, like on a piece of paper. So that way that's not, it's an image, which is different. and you're not taking up a bunch of space on their screen with text, that's probably how I would do it if it was a first email.
Okay, we should try this. So yeah, that's...
Yeah, let me know how it works.
Yeah. So last question, what advice would you give to someone prospecting enterprise account for the first time? And what advice should they ignore?
Enterprise prospecting, you need to do your research. It needs to be deeply personalized. And then the last thing is do use the phone or LinkedIn voice if you can. The phone is the least noisy channel. Think about how many texts and emails you get every day versus how many voicemails, right? Like, and again, you're not on a voicemail or a LinkedIn voice, you're not asking them to call you back. Josh Braun talks about the voicemail being the advertisement for the email or the LinkedIn message that you've already sent, but it just gets attention because it's different, right? And there's also some data, some studies out there that show that when people hear your voice, they like you more. Like, now you have to bring energy to the call, right? And you have to bring energy to the message, but hearing someone's voice feels more personal than just seeing text. So you need to use that whenever you can, whether that's phone, LinkedIn voice, video, however you're doing it. And the advice they should ignore, the advice that they got, hopefully they're not getting now, but that they got it when they were doing SMB or mid-market, which is activity is the name of the game. No, not an enterprise. Quality. It's quality over quantity. The more accounts you have, the more the quantity of activity matters. The fewer accounts you have, the more quality each touch has to be.
Well, Krysten, it was a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. But before we end the episode, do you have something else you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, it's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. Folks can find me on LinkedIn, share more. This is kind of everything we talked about today is based off of stuff I share on LinkedIn, trying to do stuff that's very tactically broken down. And so I get a lot of questions around discovery, and I just released my discovery guide yesterday. So if they follow me on LinkedIn, they can find that there. But love to get feedback and also hear if folks tried what we talked about today, how it went.
Well, thank you so much for everything. And for everyone listening, I see you on the next episode.